Following on from playing the bass with the drum kit that you can see online on my channel, please do subscribe for future content and you can see all sorts of other things as well. I've got Logan here playing B-side rhythm. This is GarageBand iOS. Logan playing B-side, no fills, 16th swing light under the swing banner on the bottom left corner. Hi-hat is set to 5, kick and snare to 1, and I've got in the little sort of 3D thing, I've got simple and reasonably loud. So you've got snare drum instead of a cross stick. So if you listen to this drum beat, first work out where the beats are, and I was sort of nodding my head to that. It's a good idea to nod so that you can really feel where those other things come. The hi-hats are the most detailed thing here, playing 16th notes. So there are 4 of those. I know it looks like my fingers were sort of twitching unnecessarily, but I was counting the hi-hats in all those beats. Now, Sir Duke by Stevie Wonder has got that really complex sort of bass line in the middle, but the opening section you can play with these hi-hats. Now the best way to do this, I've been playing this tune for quite a number of years, just out on gigs and that, but occasionally I come in the studio or sit in the practice room and just slow it all the way back down, just to make sure that I've still got that technical, that I haven't fallen into any bad habits. All musicians from all walks of life do this in order just to keep tabs on what they're doing. So it also means that you can work out that there's that bar's rest in between the first and the second goes through that riff. It's important to leave all of that really, really silent and only come in with the next riff absolutely as late as you dare. And it just increases your instinct and your memory of how that riff actually works. Now, as an aside, with tablature, this bit, we know that that is right. I've always played it like that, but some people play it like this. They just do 8th notes. Or it's really up to you what you do. It's a bit different with the line in the middle, where you're playing in unison with your brass section, and it's got to be absolutely there. But really, nobody's going to really care if you do this. Nobody's going to come up to you and say you've got the D sharp in your 3rd bar. If they do, it means they need some mates. So at the end. So the riff is in B major, so starting in middle finger 7th fret, 6th fret on the next string, which is a D sharp, and then F sharp, which is at 9th, and B, which is at 9th on your D string. Notice how I've used all 4 fingers to do this. You don't want to get into this. You don't want to do that because you're creating lots and lots of work for yourself. And that's much cleaner as well. Now with these sort of notes here, you don't necessarily need to pluck them, and actually it sounds better sometimes if you don't, because they are sort of incidental, sort of offbeat rhythms. That can sound a bit sort of, that's got just a bit more dynamics to it. And for some reason, every time I do that, I do a little triplet line here, where I drag across the strings. You can do it or you can not do it. It doesn't matter. But the chief thing to do is to make sure that you are rhythmic with your drummer, who's going to go. If you and the drummer are locked in, you're absolutely there. Now, the next bit, after the verse, you've got this. Only play this at race speed, as it were, when you're actually out on the gig itself. If you run a marathon, you don't run 26 miles in training, you run 20. And then 26 happens on the day. Same thing should apply to music practice and music performance, where you're sat practicing and you don't play it at race speed, because actually you can get into bad habits, and if something goes wrong it can be difficult to fix. So you want to remain inside your comfort zone most of the time and only slightly push yourself when you're just raising the tempo a little. So it really is a sort of knife edge that you have to walk to make this riff work properly. So Logan can help us. So I'm going to slow him down to about 52 or something. Ba 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 ba. Yeah, that'll do me. Okay, so here we go. I'll give myself 2 beats in. Now, if you play it at race speed all the time, but you kind of forget how the riff goes when you play it slower, it means you've got to play it more slowly, because then it's just second nature when you come to play it, and actually the speeding up to race speed happens on its own. So now I haven't shown much of the tab, I've just done this bit at the beginning. You can find the tabs for this online. Now, your best bet when you find tabs is to simply find type it in on Google and look at 2 different versions, because they're not always going to be the same. And the answer is you choose the one that you like. There are misprints, you do get frets that aren't right, but that's more obvious. But one thing you don't get with many of the riffs online is you don't get the rhythmic information imparted. It's just numbers. So they are of limited use to you. The best way to do it is to listen to the record, and listening is as important as the reading side of things. There's a sort of a war between people who read music and people who don't read music. One thinks the other's daft, one thinks the other's snobby. It's nonsense. Both things are equally good. Your ear is vastly important to you. When you listen to that riff and you've got to work out where those rhythmic lines actually go in the grand scheme. So when you're listening to the riff at top speed on the record, tap the beats. Oh yeah, okay, so that first one's on the beat, but the second one is just after the second beat. So when you've got your numbers in front of you from the internet, then you've got to work out the rhythm of how it goes, and that's often takes a little bit more working out. So the riff that I've played here, there's all sorts of ways you could do this. Because of the nature of the bass or any string instrument, you can play this G, there, or there. So, are you going to do this? or this. The advantage of this method up here is that the frets are slightly closer together, it's easier to reach, but you've got to somehow reach that second fret there. Now this underlines another important aspect of the practice, is that the movement from here to that fret there, the movement of your arm and your fingers from getting last finger there to annular finger there is part of the riff. Many people just look at the notes and forget what happens between, but actually the whole thing has to be worked out in a rhythmic sense. So for example, how am I going to create the rhythm it looks daft and I might look a right idiot doing it, but actually you've got to work that out so that you can then deliver the next bit. You've got loads of time to get to that one, so that's not a worry, it's this one. And also, because you've got the frets wider here, you could use your last finger there, because there's not actually anything happening that warrants all four fingers to be used. That's really the only time you should do that. On other frets you should use all of your fingers where appropriate. Now that's easier because you're actually only moving one finger. I've just played it in another way there. To be honest, it's up to you how you do this. What you could do is you could use the rest that you've got to actually kind of give yourself a stepping stone. Or there's all sorts of different ways of doing this. The tablature doesn't always make that clear, and also unless you are watching the original bass player playing this in the studio, you won't know really which method it was that was being used. I suppose I'll go right to him and ask him. Now there, you want to make sure that if you do hammer-ons and pulls, that it's going to be accurately played rhythmically. It may be easier to do that with your right hand. Now I don't mean to sound non-committal here and thinking, well, I'm giving a lesson on how to play a riff and I don't even know what the riff is myself in terms of the fingering, but actually it's not the point. The notes are the important things and the rhythms. Where you play stuff, it's up to you, you know. Three different methods that sound fairly similar. They have varying degrees of difficulty, varying sounds. It's up to you. Pick the one that's easiest. Of course, why wouldn't we do that? So for something like Sir Duke, it's picking something that's easy to play. You're not going to do this. Of course you're not going to do that, but it's a certain amount of common sense is involved in getting the fingering to be right and making sure that you use, if it's called for, that you use your last finger. This down the bottom is the hardest place on the bass to play because you've got to reach round with all four fingers. So make your thumb come all the way round here so that you can easily reach any of the fourth frets here with your last finger, and similarly you can play the first finger on the first fret, and then your other fingers, because they're longer, they're a little bit easier to actually get into position on second and third frets. different fingering there again. So practicing really slowly to start with, and what you can do is you can just do the with Logan. Just sit there and play with that. When you've done the first bit of that riff, you get that sort of psychological boost to go, oh yeah, great, and go on to the second line. Then put both things together. Don't be tempted to go on to the next bit until you've covered those two bits. Now, one or two of those notes weren't firmly produced. It's because I'm going too quickly. Actually, you won't believe how quickly it will take you to learn a riff if you do it slowly. I know you think, well, slow and quick, they're opposites, but how does that work? The answer is, if you make lots of mistakes, you're constantly having to undo them. And also, if you play a note that's incorrect but just correct it as you go, you are leaving that sort of little black mark there. It's like writing a CD too quickly. You get errors and the thing doesn't play or doesn't load any data. So think of it as recording a CDR at half speed. Just enjoy the sound you make. So there is an in-depth sort of view of Sir Duke. Now the verse has chords in it. It's more a chord sequence rather than a specific bass line. Music is a world within itself. There's a language we all understand. You have a little fill there. That will also coincide with the drum fill. But of course the lyrics, there are words there. So that means that the bass line has to be sympathetic to that lyric. You always play for the song. So when you're doing the it's the chance for the band to sort of show off, or the chance to bring out a riff. Because there's no words there. You wouldn't do music is a world within itself. There's a language we all understand. It's just getting away. Music is a world within itself. Is a language we all understand. So there we are. There is a sort of a version of Sir Duke, and I hope that helps you in your quest to learn one of the best tunes on that album.